Hi everyone, welcome to our mammal physiology video. By the end of this video, you will be able to explain the structure, function, and adaptive advantage of all of these systems in mammals: integumentary, skeletal, cardiovascular, respiratory, digestive, and nervous. So starting out with the integumentary system. Mammals have a lightweight and waterproof epidermis, skin, and it's adapted for a variety of environments. Some mammals have epidermal scales, like a beaver's tail and a rat's tail. The armadillo has what's called dermal plates, and so those are kind of overlapping scales. The epidermis gives rise to hair, glands, nails, scales, hooves, baleen, and horns. So lots of different integumentary accessories in different mammals. Hair, of course, is the most common, and hair arises from the epidermis, but in ancestral synapsids, there wasn't hair, but there were just mechanoreceptors in the skin in the epidermis. So kind of sensory cells, and then over time, over evolutionary history, those developed into hair. Generally, mammals with fur have guard hairs and underfur, so kind of two different kinds of hairs. And you can see those two here, where the guard hairs are more coarse and kind of the striped hairs on the outside, and then the underfur is underneath, and it's finer, shorter, kind of more fluffy, and more for insulation. Hair is non-living, and it is generally, in most mammals, replaced continuously. Many mammals, not all, will molt annually. Usually that happens in the fall. There are some mammals that molt twice a year, like deer. Deer are more kind of reddish brown through the summer months, and then more grayish in the fall, and so they molt twice for that change. And a lot of times when deer are molting, they look kind of pathetic, right? People will call and think that there are sick deer, that deer have mange or something. They're just molting for either their summer or their winter fur. There are some mammals that when they molt, they completely change color, and it's to function for camouflage, like the snowshoe hare. So snowshoe hare that have a color molt in the time of year where there's not snow, they'll be brown, then they molt, and in the time of year when there is snow, they're white, so that they blend in with both environments. Now, it's photoperiod combined with melatonin production that initiates molt. And with some species like snowshoe hare, there's actual geographic variation. So not all snowshoe hare molt from brown and white, and brown to white and back again. So if you look here along the Pacific Northwest, where they don't get as much snow, like right along the coast, they stay brown. There's just brown hairs there, they stay brown. And then there are some areas where snow cover is pretty much consistent through the 12 months of the year, where snowshoe hares stay white. They just have the white color morph. And then in the green areas, that's where you have the molts. And so this is interesting, and there's some really neat research going on about climate change. So in the areas where there are both, where there is the molt, they're finding that sometimes the timing of first snow is not synchronized with when the hairs are changing color. And so if a hair changes color to white and there's no snow, they're kind of like a marshmallow on the landscape, really susceptible to predation. And so we're thinking about, well, so could there be ecological rescue from these populations that are only brown and don't change? So there's really neat research on that related to climate change. Horns and antlers. So some, but not all, mammals have horns or antlers. They function mostly in reproductive behavior, also in defense or offense, whatever the case may be. True horns we find in the bovine family. So cattle, antelope, sheep, goats. true horns are permanent bone with a dermal core and then an epidermal sheath. So if you were to see the skull of an animal that has true horns, you'd see this sheath, and when it's just the skull without the other tissues connecting, you can pull off this epidermal sheath, and then underneath is just that permanent bone. Usually, and now the pronghorn, I think, is a kind of a little bit branched, right? But usually horns are not branched. You don't see them like with multiple tines like you do with antlers. The horns grow from the base, and they'll have annual growth rings. So if you do a cross section of a horn, you can tell the age of an animal. Antlers are usually branched, so you see multiple tines. Now, the youngest animals with antlers might not quite have multiple branches yet, but eventually they'll have multiple branches. They are solid, and they are made of bone, but it's not permanent bone. So antlers are fed by the velvet and are kind of living bone for a period of time, and then when the velvet falls off, they're no longer fed with blood vessels, and so then it's dead bone, and then eventually it's shed. So this is an annual process of growing antlers, shedding antlers. In general, antlers are a secondary sex characteristic exhibited only by males, except for in caribou, where both males and females have antlers, and it's because they use them to dig through the snow to find grass to eat. So males and females got to eat, so they both have them. The males are much bigger, and that's for that the secondary sex characteristic function for attracting a mate, but for the function of eating, they both have them. Testosterone plays a big role in antler production, and photoperiod, so the length of the day, signals the replacement of antlers. Antlers typically start growing in the spring, they're full grown in the summer, they remain through the fall, and then they're shed midwinter. So maybe some of you like to go out shed hunting. So this is hunting that involves no guns, going out just looking for shed antlers. And it's pretty exciting to find shed antlers, especially if you're in an area with different species. Again, that velvet is the skin that has blood vessels that feed the growing antlers. And once, like early fall, once they're full grown, the velvet will just rub off. Mammals have a variety of glands that are important to their survival and reproduction. First of all, mammary glands. Mammals are the only taxa of vertebrates that have mammary glands. They are modified sweat glands that produce milk for young. And the hormone prolactin, which is actually produced in the brain, in the pituitary gland, which is housed in the brain, prolactin is what signals milk production after young are born. The number of teats on mother mammals is variable. It's typically equal to either the maximum litter size or twice the average litter size. So for most mammals, there are usually more nipples than there are young. Sebaceous glands are oil glands. And so if you look here, you see that sebaceous glands generally kind of flank a hair follicle, so they secrete the oil to lubricate hairs. In some species, the oils that are secreted from the sebaceous glands are actually antibacterial, so kind of protecting the animal from any potential infections. Scent glands. Different species exhibit different types of scent glands in different areas of their body, but in general, scent glands are used in some cases to mark territories, to attract mates, for defense. So kind of the most famous mammal scent gland is that of the skunk, and the scent glands in skunks are located in anal sacs. Great diagram of it here. Used for defense in that case. If scent glands are used to communicate from one member of a species to another member of that same species, then it's considered a pheromone. The skeletal system of mammals start at the top. We have the skull. Remember, mammals are synapsid, so they have a single pair of temporal fenestra. So it's basically this kind of opening back here behind the orbit. There's also the zygomatic arch around the orbit. So kind of here, the zygomatic arch. Again, the skull of humans has more complex ear bones than other vertebrates. And then the vertebrae in mammals is unique, where we have cervical vertebrae. So if you look at the human skull, it's kind of the neck, thoracic vertebrae, and then sacral vertebrae and caudal vertebrae. You can see them on the cat also: cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacral, and caudal vertebrae. So remember the synsacrum in the birds, those bunch of vertebrae that are fused to make this really like heavy, or at least a really strong part of their vertebrae to support their bipedalism and their flight. So in mammals, there are 5 fused sacral vertebrae, and it's called the sacrum, and that supports the pelvis. So again, it's fused vertebrae to support the locomotion needed in mammals, but a little different need there than we saw in the birds. In apes and humans, in addition to having the fused vertebrae in the sacrum, there are fused caudal vertebrae, like the tail vertebrae, to make the tailbone. So humans and apes don't have a tail per se, like these caudal vertebrae form in the cat. They have the tailbone that's fused caudal vertebrae. Couple different forms of locomotion seen in mammals. We have plantigrade, digitigrade, and unguligrade. Plantigrade, we see in insectivores, monkeys, apes, humans, bears, where the entire surface of the foot, not the food, is on the ground. Usually have pentadactyl, so 5 fingers, hands and feet, 5 fingers or toes. So flat on the ground, you see here. Digitigrade we see in rabbits, rodents, carnivores, where they bear their weight on the ends of their metacarpals and metatarsals. So standing like up on tippy toe is what we have here, where this is the heel, but really it's kind of up. Their heel doesn't touch the ground. So their wrists and ankles are elevated. Thumb is typically reduced or lost. This allows for greater speed than plantigrade. Then unguligrade, where the weight of the body is on the hoofs. So it's basically like just on the very last joints of the toes. That's where all of the weight is borne. So most of the toe is off the ground. They have modified claws. We see this in artiodactyls. So they have cloven hooves. For some, in artiodactyls, 2 digits function is the hoof. So this is deer, elk, caribou, giraffes, antelopes, bison, goats, and sheep. There are also perissodactyls, where just 1 digit functions as the hoof, and that's for horse and rhinoceros. So again, this is allows for speed, but not as much kind of maneuvering. They're not quite as stable as digitigrade animals. The cardiovascular system of mammals has a 4-chambered heart like the bird, so highly efficient. Mammals have a variable heart rate, and across the different species of mammals, the variation is huge. So look at this graph where you've got small mammals have 500 beats per minute and above. Some shrews can get up to 1,000 heartbeats per minute, all the way down to an elephant. Elephants sometimes have as low as 25 beats per minute. On here it has them clocking in around, looks like about maybe 30 or so here. But whales also have very low. This is interesting because it shows a relationship between the life expectancy and the heart rate. So in general, the higher the heart rate, the lower the life expectancy. The lower the heart rate, the longer the life expectancy. Humans, we kind of fooled the system a little bit because our heart rate is higher than some larger mammals, but our life expectancy on average is longer. But if you come over where we kind of should be on that graph and come down, it's like late 40s, which hundreds of years ago, that probably was the average life expectancy of a human. Mammal blood is unique. We have 3 different kinds of blood cells: erythrocytes, leukocytes, and thrombocytes. So red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. The red blood cells, so red blood cells here, they look kind of like a smushed down disc. They do not have a nucleus, so they have a one-track mind to carry oxygen. They don't need a nucleus to be the brain of the cell. There's only one job they have to do, and that makes mammals unique for having these 3 types of blood cells and non-nucleated red blood cells. The respiratory system of mammals starts at the pharynx, goes into the trachea, which the trachea is covered by the epiglottis. So that's the flap that goes over the trachea when you eat so that you don't get food that goes into your respiratory system. When you breathe, that opens so the air can go into the bronchi. The 2 bronchi going to each lung, that branches into bronchioles. And then, so you see these branching bronchioles here, you get to the smallest kind of functional unit of the lungs is called the alveoli. So these are little pockets where gas exchange happens. They are highly vascularized, so blood vessels go to the alveoli to pick up oxygen, drop off carbon dioxide. And again, the reason they look like kind of a bunch of grapes is to maximize the surface area for gas exchange. The diaphragm is unique among all vertebrates, so it's unique to mammals. No other vertebrates besides mammals have this muscular diaphragm, and it's located between the pleural cavity and the abdominal cavity. It's the muscle that contracts to pull air into the lungs. So it's a dome shape. Look here, it's kind of like a dome. And when it contracts, it flattens out, and that sucks air into your lungs, expands the thoracic cavity, and it does that by creating like a negative pressure to suck the air in. And then when the diaphragm's relaxed, it goes back to dome shape, kind of pushing the air back out of your lungs. Digestive system of mammals, again, there's variety across different species of mammals, but generally starts with the oral cavity. We'll look at it on the rabbit. Oral cavity, the esophagus connects the mouth to the stomach. Then you're into the small intestine, winds around, then enters the large intestine, and then the rectum and exit at the anus. But there's a diversity of feeding strategies in mammals, which leads to a diversity in the digestive anatomy. So herbivore digestive systems in mammals can be pretty unique. In ruminants, so ruminant herbivores have what's called a rumen. It's a chamber. It's like a fermentation chamber to break down the cellulose and the plant matter that these animals are ingesting. And then there's lots and lots and lots and lots of intestine. The longer the intestine indicates herbivore. There's also a cecum that excretes digestive enzymes, more intestine before leaving. Now, if you look at a carnivore where they don't have to break down the cellulose, much shorter. There's not that rumen, no fermentation chamber. There is still a cecum, but it's much smaller in comparison. And then there's some herbivores like rabbits and hares that are herbivorous, but are not ruminants. So they don't have that rumen, the fermentation chamber, but they do have a giant cecum where some fermentation occurs and also lots of digestive enzymes to help break down that plant matter. When I say the fermentation, what's in that fermentation chamber, the rumen, is bacteria and sometimes even protists. So it's a symbiotic relationship to help break down that cellulose that typically mammals can't break down on their own. Dentition in mammals. So diffeodont teeth, that means that there's two sets of teeth. So baby teeth, adult teeth, or milk teeth, deciduous teeth, all of those are names for baby teeth. So they come out, either they're already out at birth or they come out soon after birth. And then those at some point are lost and the permanent or adult teeth replace them. Heterodont dentition means that there's different kinds of teeth within one mammal mouth. So there's molars, canines, incisors, and they all serve a different purpose. Grinding for the molars, kind of biting for the canines, slicing for the incisors. Not all mammals have all the kinds of teeth. So some herbivores don't have canines. Some herbivores, like deer, don't have upper incisors. They just have the bottom ones, and they kind of shear them against the bone of the top jaw to eat grasses. So lots of variety there. Those herbivores that don't have canines have this space, and that space is called a diastema. In predators, carnivores, we see what's called carnassial teeth, or the carnassial pair. In the carnassial pair are teeth that are adapted to like shear against each other when the mouth closes, and they're very strong, and so they're able to rip like tendons, sometimes even to snap bones. So in predators, you see the carnassial pair. Nervous system, we'll start with hearing. So again, mammals have pretty well-developed hearing compared to the other taxa of vertebrates. The pinna is the external part of the ear. And then the ear canal, also called the external auditory meatus, is what conveys sound from the outside into the eardrum. In the middle ear, there's 3 bones. Remember, those 3 bones are unique to mammals: malleus, incus, and stapes. And what they're doing is transmitting the vibrations from the eardrum to the inner ear, and it's in the inner ear that the signal gets sent to the brain. So the cochlea is the inner ear, and it has these little hair cells that convert the mechanical energy, the vibration coming through the eardrum. It converts it into nerve impulses that get transmitted to the brain. It's pretty wild when you think about it. And some mammals are capable of echolocation, so using sounds to either navigate, locate food, communicate with other conspecifics, animals of the same species. Continuing in the nervous system with eyes. The eyes of mammals are similar to other amniotes, so reptiles and birds. Some mammals are colorblind, whales and seals, so they pretty much just see in grayscale. Many mammals have dichromatic vision, and that includes dogs. So this kind of shows what a dog would see versus what we would see. Primates, including us, have trichromatic vision. So we see blue, green, and red, and all the combinations thereof. Moles and rats, some species have vestigial eyes. So over the course of evolutionary time, they spend most of their time underground, and so sight has become not as important. So sight becomes reduced. Their eyes are maybe have very little function or are not functional at all. The nose in mammals is highly developed. Most mammals have large nasal passages, and especially in nocturnal mammals where sight might not be quite as important, in those cases, smell is even more well developed. All right, so circle back, make sure you have a good understanding of the structure, function, and adaptive advantage of each of these systems. You can always go back on the video if you want to watch again. Joke time. What do you call an elephant that never washes? A smell-elephant. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in class.